If being a pastor is carrying on the ministry of Jesus as we understand it, then that means that person is a servant among servants, that they are for the weak, for the lost, for the disenfranchised, for the oppressed, for the voiceless, for the downtrodden.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Groomed.Connect, the podcast that loves you. Every week
Better than all the other ones.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, I feel like we've been on quite a bit. You're probably getting sick of us, but there's been some breaking news, as most of you know. Just to recap, Jeannie Mayo has received, I believe, a letter from the Assemblies of God removing her credentials because of allegations of sexual abuse of a minor, and then there's other things. I'm not exactly sure what is in that letter, but we do know that she has been dismissed. She has 60 days to appeal it. I don't know if she will, and I don't know if that'll even help, but that's where we're at. We've had several people contact us and thank us. We've had a few people push back a little bit, but nothing really significant. Most people are thanking us for coming on and talking about this stuff. And we want to reiterate that we're not happy about this. This isn't a happy day. This has actually been a bad week for me personally. I can't speak for Brian, but I don't like this, but it's necessary. It's one of those things that is ugly and nasty, and I hate that it had to happen, but too many victims were silenced, and it's time for them to have a voice. And so that's what this is about. So Brian, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm a part of a couple of private Facebook groups, one of them with old Bellevue Christian High School students, and all of them I've posted on, and they're just blowing up with comments. People reaching out to me with personal messages, calling me. Nobody with stories like Sean's, but all of them, affirming, yeah, there was something wrong. Yeah, we were part of that. Yeah, thank you guys for doing what you're doing. And that is what I'm focusing on right there. That's my focus. It's like these people now their stories have been validated. They're not isolated. They're not alone. They know other people share their experience. They also know that the people in power have finally taken action on their behalf. Finally. This hasn't happened before, and that's an incredibly empowering and healing thing for those people. And that's where my heart is today. And whether it's Jeannie or anybody else we've mentioned on this podcast, here's my hurdle, Mike. If they want to go out and say to the people that they hurt, or for those who enabling her to continue to hurt people by looking the other way and staying silent, if they want to come on and say, you know what, we could have done, we should have done, we didn't, and they want to reach out and do the best that they can do to bring restoration and healing to these people by owning it, whatever part they had in it, then yeah, then we can talk. Until then, if you're going to play, you got to pay. Let me just say, I don't wish any of them ill will or suffering. But the fact of the matter is that some serious offenses and even some not so serious offenses were committed on innocent people, and they deserve those kinds of acts of restoration before we can move on.
100%. And I'm going to read a letter that I wrote to Doug Clay here in a little bit. But before we get into that, I want to just kind of give people a roadmap to how this happened. In 2020, there was allegations that Jeannie knew about a situation and covered it up. It was a sexual assault that happened, and there was a cover-up, allegedly. And so the Assemblies of God looked into it because of some people, and I want to mention them. And I'm just going to say this. There's probably going to be people I'm missing, because I know the people I know, but I'm almost positive there were more people involved in getting this started. But the five people that started this movement to get Jeannie Mayo accountable was Juliana Morris, Jonathan Kendall, Justin and Anisha Brostek, and of course we had Melissa Holcomb on last week on the podcast. She was one of them as well. And when they started a petition and began to stir up stories on the Facebook page and then also on that petition page, it got overwhelming. I mean, there's so many people came forward and told their story, and some stories again were I don't want to scale them because they're all horrible. They all should not have happened, but there were some that were heartbreaking and bothersome. I mean, it just really bothered you kind of with what happened. But there was other people like Adam Hume, David Michael, David Bricky. But bottom line is there was several people that came forward. What I saw at that time, as somebody who was sitting in the cheap seats kind of watching it, was that the people that I thought should have said, oh, okay, we see the gravity of this. We're going to jump in and help you because we have firsthand knowledge to the fact that you are telling the truth. But these people came in and actually they got silence and they didn't say anything and they didn't give these people a cover, and it bothered me. So I decided to write a book and I began to tell my story, and it paralleled what happened to me in Boston. I was in a sex trafficking ring. I've chronicled this in the book. And when I was in 8th grade, and they used grooming techniques to pull me in. And as I sat back and saw what was happening with Jeannie and with all these different players, I went, they're doing the same thing. It's bait and switch. It's love bombing. It's I love you, I love you, I love you. And then let's change the rules. And that's exactly what groomers do. And I saw all that. And then I saw these people being silenced. And I went, no, I'm not going to do that. And I put the book out. And honestly, I didn't realize what was going to happen. All kinds of stuff happened. People started coming out of the woodwork because I was an authority, in the sense that I had worked for her and I had been in the room. I'd been around her for 10 years and I was a prominent voice, especially in Rockford. And so, and I knew that was going to happen. And I knew when I put that out, it was going to be, there was going to be a ripple effect, and there was. And some of it was negative. I got pushback from different people that I didn't expect, and some I did expect from. And that happened, and all that was going on. And then as I saw the momentum going, and you and I were talking a lot, and you had contributed a lot, and we were uncovering the stuff that happened in Bellevue with Jen Christensen, and all that was going on, I went to my pastor and I said, hey, I want to send this book down to Springfield and show Doug Clay and to push this door open. I mean, I feel all this momentum behind me, and I just feel like we don't want to, not capitalize on this. And his words, and he was very wise. Jeff Baker was one of my really good friends and a pastor at New Life in Kearney. He said, Mike, don't do that. He said, just let it do its own work. He goes, you guys cracked a door that has been locked for a long time. You cracked it open. Yes, it's only cracked right now, but he said, wait, because there'll be people that come behind you and they will push the door open. And so that is exactly what happened. And I may miss some people, but we had on the podcast pushing the door open was Corey Tyson from Rockford. We had Jen Christensen from Bellevue, told her story. Corey told his. Leslie Butcher, who worked for her in California, I believe, and a little bit in Atlanta, she told her story. Pastor Rick Cole, who is his dad is on Mount Rushmore for the Assemblies of God, and Pastor Rick Cole is a great man of God. He had an experience with Jeannie up in Sacramento that was very negative. He told his story very classy, in a classy way. Eileen Fires came on and shared, her, not just what happened with Sean Weaver, but other things that she experienced up in Rockford. And then obviously Melissa Holcomb was on. And then Sean Weaver was the one that really shoved the door open, and how brave he was to tell that story of sexual abuse that happened allegedly with Jeannie. And so that's where we're at. That door just came flying open, and here it is.
Yeah. And all of those people that Mike has mentioned, and there's more that we don't know about that spoke up, they're all the heroes here. They're all the heroes because they, rather than staying silent, staying in the shadows, they gave voice. And I think all of them understood and were motivated by the fact that they knew that by them telling their stories, they could enable other people to tell their stories, and they could lift the lid off of this, not as an act of let's go get somebody in trouble, but as an act of love to the other people who had been shamed and shunned into silence, that also need to tell their stories, that need to be able to say, hey, as we've said multiple times on this podcast, that it's not me, it's them.
Right. And speaking of them, I want to say that, we have mentioned people that stayed silent, that, I told you last week, I'm having to work through some of my anger towards those people, and I'm trying, but I want to be fair to them as well. Rick Lorimer, Gary Hoyt, Rod Whitlock, Jeremy DeWert, to my knowledge, did not know about the Sean Weaver situation. So when I say they knew things, I'm not talking about that. To my knowledge, nobody really knew about that until later, um, when Sean shared it. I didn't know. I'd heard rumors about things, but I had nothing concrete. And the rumors came out about a year ago after I wrote the book, so I didn't know anything about that. But I want to be fair to those guys because I don't think, unless you have knowledge that they did and you want to share that with us, that's fine. But to my knowledge, Rick Lorimer, Gary Hoyt, Rod Whitlock, Jeremy DeWert did not know about the sexual abuse with Sean Weaver, alleged
Yeah,
sexual abuse.
right. Agreed with that statement.
Okay. Brian, I want to read a letter that I wrote to Doug Clay that I'm going to submit to him. And I'm going to actually put this letter in the notes. So if you want to copy and paste it and send it to people, you're certainly welcome to do that. This is a letter that I want. It's more than a letter. It's a thank you, and it's also a statement of warning, that I want to give. So I'm just going to read it. Dear Doug Clay, first I want to sincerely thank you for taking Sean Weaver's story seriously and responding with swift and decisive action. Your leadership in voting to discipline Jeannie Mayo brought a great deal of healing to Sean and to so many others who have carried silent wounds for years. I recognize the weight of that decision, especially considering Jeannie's long-standing influence within the Assemblies of God youth ministry. Could not have been easy, but it was the right thing to do. As you may or may not know, I worked closely with Jeannie for over a decade, 6 years in Bellevue and 5 in Rockford, where I served as her assistant youth pastor. I won't go into detail about the unethical practices I witnessed during that time, as I've documented them in my book, Groomed. If you'd like a copy, I would gladly send one to you. What I do want to highlight is this: the signs were there. For years, individuals have tried to raise concerns about Jeannie's integrity and practices. I personally brought those concerns to Rick Lorimer and Rod Whitlock, both respected members of the National Youth Leadership Team in the mid-2000s. While they didn't refute what I shared, they also did nothing meaningful with the information. Jeannie continued to be platformed at the National Assemblies of God events, even if they weren't directly responsible for their invitations. They held influential voices that could have been used to protect others, but they stayed silent. Sadly, hundreds, if not thousands, were hurt in the years that followed after credible concerns were ignored. I understand how difficult it can be to see past the appearance of success. At the time, Jeannie's conferences were thriving, her leadership program was growing rapidly, and her brand was strong. But that brings me to the deeper issue I want to address. Today, I work with public school leaders to help shift unhealthy cultures, and the first thing we do is identify negative social norms that have been allowed to exist. These are behaviors or attitudes that slowly gain acceptance, not because they're right, but because the key people refuse to challenge them. We identify the influences driving these norms and invite them into a healthier vision for leadership. Just as importantly, we empower those who've gone along with toxic patterns out of fear to step up and bring change. I share this because I believe what we're facing goes far beyond Jeannie Mayo. I believe the Assemblies of God has a culture problem. And like any culture, it is shaped by the norms it tolerates. Negative social norms, especially in a church denomination, are devastating. They don't just distort leadership, they erode trust, disillusion the faithful, and ultimately compromise the credibility of the gospel itself. When unhealthy behavior is ignored, used, or rewarded in the name of success, it signals to the body that character is optional and accountability is political. This creates a climate where abusers thrive, victims are silenced, and truth becomes secondary to image. One of the most dangerous norms I see within the Assemblies of God movement is the idolatry of numbers. There's an obsession with platform size, church attendance, and celebrity status for pastors, as if the fruit of the Spirit can be measured by audience engagement. I once had an Assemblies of God pastor say to me upon learning of Jeannie's discipline in 2020, "I don't care what that little lady did, she could put butts in the seats." That mindset isn't just misguided, it's toxic. It reflects a distorted theology that says outcomes matter more than obedience. When we stop caring how the seats are filled, we will celebrate. When we stop caring about how the seats are filled, when we celebrate influence without examining integrity, we are no longer shepherds, we are performers. And I believe that grieves the heart of God. Even King David was rebuked for counting when God had asked him not to. Metrics have their place, but they are terrible masters when placed over individual people. Doug, I believe more stories are coming, more survivors, more voices, more truths that will challenge the systems and values we've allowed to be unchecked. I encourage you to prepare your heart and your leadership to receive them, not with defensiveness, but with humility and repentance. This moment, as painful as it is also an opportunity. If leaders had listened sooner, if they had been willing to confront the small foxes before they devoured the vineyard, this could have been avoided. But now, in the light of exposure, the question becomes, will we manage the fallout or will we examine the foundation? My challenge to you is this: take a hard look at what is being lifted up as success across the Assemblies of God. Listen to the language coming from your key influences. Does it reflect the humility of Jesus or the hustle of a brand? If there is room for repentance, restoration, and a return to the value that truly matters, truth, integrity, justice, compassion, then I pray you will lead boldly in that direction. Thank you again for listening, for acting, and for being willing to stand where others have sat. You've taken an important first step, and on behalf of countless nameless and wounded individuals, I am truly grateful. With respect and hope, Mike Donahue.
Well said. That was excellent. That was excellent.
And we'll put that in the notes so you can read it again.
And to be clear, we have called out the AG, and I know I've been particularly harsh in my estimation of Doug Clay and his leadership. What I want to say is that, number one, I applaud the district superintendent in Georgia for putting his foot down and taking action on this and taking swift action on this. And I do want to personally here also thank Doug Clay for doing the right thing. And it's my hope that not only in this organization, but any organization, I mean, what you've described is an epidemic that goes through, I mean, it cuts through every denominational barrier. It's everywhere. I'm hoping that these kinds of things that we're seeing, as much as I hope this changes the tenor in the AG, that all these other things begin to pile up and people take a good hard look at their cultures outside of the AG and begin to change. And, you know, I've talked to 4 people I know who are Assemblies of God pastors over the course of the past 3 days. And one of the things that came to my mind when I was talking to them is that I'm not a pastor, never wanted to be a pastor. However, I've kind of come up with this metric that I described to them. If being a pastor is carrying on the ministry of Jesus as we understand it, then that means that person is a servant among servants, that they are for the weak, for the lost, for the disenfranchised, for the oppressed, for the voiceless, for the downtrodden. That should be a shining characteristic of any pastor's ministry, if they're going to say that they're carrying on, you know, in the steps of Jesus. Now, that's my opinion. You all can decide whether you want to make that your metric. That's my metric.
It's also the metric of the Bible. Ezekiel chapter 34, verses 1 through 10 outlines what shepherds are supposed to be doing and not doing. One of the things they're not supposed to be doing is using the sheep for their benefit. And the thing they should be doing is caring for for the sick, for the lost, for the weak, for the wounded. I mean, they should be going after them. That's you just described exactly what Ezekiel, and also Ezekiel chapter 34 says, if you're not going to do that, I'm going to remove you.
Yeah.
God saying this through
Yeah.
Ezekiel, I'm going to remove the shepherds that are not doing this. And Brian was seeing that. We're seeing that across the board. Jeannie just got removed from being a shepherd, primarily because allegedly using the sheep for her own purposes. Well, as cute as she is and funny as she is and endearing as she is, God's had it. You can't do that. And
Yeah.
it's sad. It is. It's
Yeah.
sad. And I want to say something else. Melissa went on the next day after she got on our podcast. The next day she got on her Facebook page and she said something. She said that she had, she had somebody reach out to her and say, "Well, you did some of the same things that Jeannie did to me," and she handled it great. She humbly said how she handled this person. Basically, yeah, you're right. She didn't get defensive. She didn't say, well, I was made to do it. But I do want to say something in defense of that. That to keep in good graces with that toxic environment, if you're a leader there, you're judged based on how you do ministry. And if you're not doing those things, then you will be confronted. And that's what happened. I think Melissa did the right thing. She owned it. She said to that person, "I am sorry," which I have done and I will do. But there is something to be said about the fact that that stuff gets mentored down the hill. That's why it's so important to cut it off at
Right.
the head. That's why it's so important not to tolerate it with people at the top, because it's going to filter down. And
Hmm.
we've heard story after story of, I got some emails from people that never even met Jeannie Mayo, but she mentored some people that hurt them because she mentored them in the way she does it. So they picked up that spirit from them, from Jeannie, and passed it on to this kid who never met Jeannie but was affected by her. You got to hit the head. You've got to.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, you've got to change the culture because that's what has happened. It's been tolerated, and you've got to change the culture. I was listening to a presentation today that included a former pastor. His name's Brian McLaren. Some of you may know who Brian McLaren is. He's an author. He was a pastor for 24 years, and the topic was spiritual abuse. And he was asking Hillary McBride. Hillary McBride she's a clinician, she's an academic, she's got her PhD, she specializes in spiritual abuse and all of those kinds of things. And he said, so it's something that I hope I can see reflected across the landscape of pastors out there as they come to realize, hey, maybe I did some of that stuff too, unknowingly, unwittingly, right? Because it's passed on. He said, he says, I've been on both sides of this. I was a pastor for 24 years, and I realized that I did some of these things to people. I caused hurt to some people. He said, I don't think I was malicious. I didn't mean to. It was just the way we understood that you did things in that paradigm. I've also been hurt by those institutions. They went on to have a discussion about what people in that position can do with that. And essentially the answer was own it, right? Own it. And he was owning it. And I thought he didn't have to say that. I mean, he's a speaker, he's an author, he's well renowned. He showed a tremendous amount of humility in saying that. And again, I hope that we begin to see more of that, right? That people can come out from under their shame and treat it like Melissa did and say, hey, yeah, you're right, I did it. But you're spot on, Mike. The other thing that all of us need to understand when we look at folks is that some of these people were trained to do that. And that was Brian McLaren's point. He said, we were trained by the system to do that. We thought this was how you did things. That doesn't excuse any hurtful actions. That doesn't excuse any trauma or any hurt that happened, but realizing that and admitting that and owning that can go a long way to helping those people who were hurt or abused healed.
Yeah, 100%. And we invite you, if you're one of those pastors or leaders that hurt somebody, you want to come on this podcast, use it as a platform to say you're sorry. Yeah, there's no shame here. We're not trying to shame anybody. But this system has got to stop because it keeps hurting people.
Right,
It keeps hurting people. And
right,
it's got to be called out. Like I said in my letter, this is bigger than Jeannie Mayo. This is bigger than all these people we've mentioned. It's a system that rewards numbers and rewards sensation rather than, Brian, I think of pastors that I know, and I'm not going to say their names, but I think of some really good guys that I know that their churches were never really huge, right? But they did great things. You know, they like, I just picture Jesus up in the corner just clapping for them, going, "Way to go! You helped a marriage. You helped that teenage kid get through a really bad time." Like, he cares about individuals, and it's highlighted in the story of the sheep and the goats. The people that Jesus knew were the people that individually took care of people. He said, I knew you because you came into the prison. You gave me clothes, me. That's the metrics Jesus uses to reward. He says, if you give a glass of water in his name to somebody, that's rewarded. It's not the big numbers and the big fancy stuff. It is that individual person that God is thinking about right now, that's sitting on the side of her bed with a gun in her hand that wants to take her life because she doesn't think she's valuable. That's who he sees. He sees that right now. He doesn't see the big church tomorrow. He's worried about her. What are we doing for her? What are we doing for her, Pastor? What are we doing for her? Let's do stuff for her. Let's find a way to get her.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about this a lot, but I think we're going to see a sea change in that industry. And I call it an industry, and I've called it an industry because a lot of those places are just sort of, they exist to continue to exist, right? And they've lost the plot. And we've encouraged people, if you're in a place like that, vote with your feet. Go find people who are really just trying to create a community where people can be loved and supported and helped and that kind of thing. And I hope that transition happens. I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm not going to be, I'm not a glass half full kind of person, so I'll believe it when I see it. But I can hope for that. Can I mention a couple of other?
Brian's Brian's motto is Humpty Dumpty was pushed. Just kidding. Go ahead.
So I want to mention a couple other guests we had on as well that I just want to personally thank. One of them was Dr. Dina, came on, and we had a great podcast with her, and she was able to say some things around the context of Jennifer Christensen's experience that I think were really powerful. And I would encourage people who are maybe coming to this podcast later, who maybe have experienced some of those things, go find that and go listen to her. She was brilliant. I'm also gonna be a homer, and we had my wife on one podcast, and she talked about healing. And Mike and I don't know where we're going from here. We're going to keep going, and we're going to keep calling out the things that we're calling. But we'd also like to have more of those kinds of resources that we can offer to people. My wife's not a counselor; she's a certified spiritual director. And we had Eileen Fires on. Eileen also came on and did that same kind of thing. So hopefully we can help to be a resource in that respect too. And in light of, Mike, what you were saying, that's really in my heart, and I know in your heart, what we're here for. We're here to help those people that need to have a voice, that need to tell their story, that need to find some healing.
Yeah. We also had Greg Kemp on too. He
Right.
offered some
Right.
stuff too. It was great. Yeah. So, well, everybody, thank you so much. And I think Brian and I are gonna continue to do this once a week for a while. We were going to every 2 weeks, but in light of what's been happening, this new surge of energy towards this, we're going to go ahead and do this every week. You get to have us next week as well. So have a great week. Stay cool. Go Red Sox.
Yeah. Go Sox.
I had to say it.
Yep.
Go Sox. All right. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Y'all be safe out there.